Okay, in our last tutorial we took a good hard look at how future value operates. It'll make more sense to us in just a moment after we get the interest and the principal running correctly. As you know, principal is your money that you put in, and interest is how much your portfolio is earning along the way. And add the two together, you get your investment balance. So it turns out that what we'll want to do next is we'll want to get the principal going correctly. And this one's a really straightforward one compared to future value, at least. It's pretty easy. What we know is throughout the year we chipped in $1,800, so I'm going to click on that. But when we say principal balance, what we're really trying to say is how much did we put in all that time thus far. And so what we're going to need to do is add to how much we had put in the previous year. Obviously nothing was in the portfolio before we even began, but that's a holding spot, so I'm going to hit that by doing J15 plus M14. I'm going to click right there and hit enter. And now notice when I pull it down, let's see if it behaves the way we had hoped. Alright, so in year 2, when I double click that, you'll simply see that it's taking the new annual contribution, and it's a little bit more than $1,800, and the reason being is we're making a little bit more on our salary. But notice how it takes that $1,845 and adds the previous $1,800 to get us a total that makes sense. So this is climbing according to how much we're putting in our 401k along the way. If I try the double click technique, it doesn't work because off to the left there is no number there. So I don't worry about that. I'm just going to physically grab it with the black hair, the black crosshair, and I'm going to drag it all the way down to the end of my project, right, like that. Okay, that's a lot of money, you think, but what's surprising is how quickly interest grows in comparison to principal. Because with interest, what we're going to do is nothing fancier than taking a look at how much we have currently in our portfolio, less how much of it was our own money called principal, and what we get left over, of course, is interest. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the beauty of this is once those two are running correctly, they're rounded to the nearest dollar. In fact, all three of these columns, simply because cents are fine for detail, but they kind of clutter up your spreadsheet. To the nearest dollar was great precision. When I highlight those two cells and do the double click technique with the black crosshair, you'll notice that everything is behaving correctly, and we can just double check. If I just randomly pick, say, interest right here, notice how it's doing exactly what I had hoped. It's taking how much is in my portfolio, $33,000, and subtracting the $22,000 and giving me the remaining interest. Okay, so that takes care of 3 crucial columns where, like I have said before, all the action really is right there. And as we move down to when we're going to retire, say at age 74, that's 40 years of a career based on, well, I'm going to change that age during the first year to maybe 28, the way it was before. There we go. So this is a little more realistic for a college student that comes out of the university starting a career at 28, age 28 that is, and then notice by year 40 of the career, or age 67, there is over $500,000 in the portfolio. And the amazing thing is look at the contrast between principal and interest. Overwhelmingly, at least 3 times that amount of how much you put in is actually interest. So it's, I think you'll find in your project you do with your numbers, you're going to be pretty impressed. Okay, the last thing we've got to do to wrap up the project is simply do some buying power. And to do that, I want to take you into a Word document. So I'm going to tab over to Word. And I'm going to show you just one more time how buying power works. You'll probably recall from Math 108 the simple formula of present value times 1 plus rate raised to the number of years will get you the future value. What we want to think about, though, is if we work it backwards, then we've got to solve this for the present value in order to calculate money in today's dollars, called buying power. So I've got to take A, and I have to divide it by 1 plus r to the y power. Nothing fancier than that, in order to get P isolated, to get that present value totally isolated. So I'm going to go back here, and with that in mind, under buying power, if if I want to know how much $1,862 would feel like 1 year later if we assume an inflation of whatever up there, then I've got to follow my formula. Again, my formula is to take the future value and divide it by 1 plus r to the number of years. So to do that, I'm going to take the future value of 1862 and divide it by quantity. So I start with a parenthesis, 1 plus, and then I need my inflation rate, because that's what this is dealing with, is how much does inflation cut into your purchasing power. So I'll click on the inflation rate, and then I'm going to close that parenthesis. But there's something kind of crucial here. I've got to remind myself I've got to lock in that inflation rate. I don't want it floating or moving down accidentally there. So I'm going to do a Command T to get those dollar signs in there. There we go. And then I get back outside the right parenthesis and I do a caret. That's a Shift 6 for many of you to get the power. So I do a caret, Shift 6, and I want to click on the number of years that have transpired thus far. Well, it's over here. It's over here in cell C15. It just raises it to that number of years. Hit enter, and just a little teeny bit of inflation after 1 year knocked our 1862 down to 1843. Not too bad. If inflation were higher than 1%, let's say I triple it to 3%, notice how your buying power obviously comes down lower because inflation hit you a little harder. Then I'm going to double click it to get it to run all the way down. And then let's go down to that career year where we finished up after 40 years, and it's it's a little depressing. Over $500,000 that you've saved, and you literally have that in your 401k based on a 7% rate of performance each year, which of course isn't reality because the stock market and your investments will go up and down, but nevertheless that buying power can be quite depressing. If we change that to a 1% inflation, you'll notice the buying power isn't quite so severe. Today's dollar's worth a little bit more to you. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You'll want to review things and ask your teacher if you have some specific questions, but for the sake of a quick recap, if I double click that purchasing or buying power formula, it was nothing more than taking how much money we have currently and dividing it by 1 plus the inflation rate locked in as an absolute cell reference, and then raised to the number of years. And you can spot check it and make sure it's behaving correctly. Right here I can see that it's using 7 as the exponent. It's using the correct investment balance, and it's locked in and using the correct inflation rate. So your project is ready to go. The ponder proof questions will be much more important overall, and I hope that they give you some great insights into what it's like to save for the long term. Thanks for visiting, and good luck with your project.